I think it's, yeah, it's recording now. So they're all going to look very similar down here. I'll bring up Chrome and I'll show you. Because like I said last week, they're all built on very similar framework. So they have a lot of the same technology or code, at least, under the hood. They just organize it a little differently. So you can see that looks similar to that. It's just styled a little differently, right? The main thing that we're going to be using is this on Firefox. It's called the inspector. In Chrome, it's called elements. In Safari, it's called elements. Safari here. You'll notice that actually, if we do this, I love doing this. It's kind of fun. Where is it? And then Chrome. All right, Chrome, and then here. So do a side-by-side comparison of like how much how much the header, like this menu bar, takes up. You can see Safari has the smallest one. It takes up the smallest amount of space. Chrome takes up a lot. Firefox is a little less than Chrome. It's like, that's probably like 5 pixels, 5 or 6 pixels less. But anyway, those are things to notice sometimes. Anyway, I don't know why really. But anyway, little things like that are important for some reason. All right, let's dock it. You can dock it and undock it. That's what I was just doing. This button here. I can stick it over here on the right, which does make your site, like, it does squish your site horizontally, which is not the best. But you can see they all look very similar. But yeah, on Safari it's called elements as well. Chrome, it's elements, and oops, that is GitHub. Why was GitHub open? And Firefox is also, or Firefox is the one where it's different. So they're all pretty much the same. If I'm mousing over elements here on Firefox, it's gonna highlight it. The highlights are always gonna be in light blue for all 3 browsers. Okay, that is the actual div, the actual container, the dimensions of that container. The color coding that's happening around it, like the yellow we see here, you might see purple as well. That is extra space being added. You can add extra space in 2 different ways, margin and padding. Okay, they have different characteristics and use them for different things. We'll go into more detail in a minute, but you can see that div is highlighted. This is the top one. If I open it up, so this is actually a really good example. This header. So the div itself is the text, and then you see that little bit of green on the flanking it, right, bookending it. That's padding, and then the orange is margin. Okay, it's just extra empty space, and like I said, we'll get into like when you should use that and how you should use it, because they're different. They behave differently. We'll get into it as we start coding. But as you're debugging, trying to figure out problems, it's good to know kind of what's going on here. You always want to kind of have your styles tab selected over here in your CSS. If you don't see this, I don't even know how to close it actually. This is Chrome. Show console drawer. I don't even know how to close it in Chrome. Is it this one? Nope. There we go. So that's got that box. I don't know why you would close it, but if you don't see it, look for something like this. At least on Firefox, that's where it is. Safari is also right there. It's the same thing. That'll open that drawer up. And then you want make sure you've got styles. What this is doing, there's actually 3 different kinds of styles: computed, rules, and visual. They have different meanings. Rules is what's actually written in the CSS. Okay, and that's what you want to see, because that's referencing your CSS file. If something has a line through it, like down here, that means it's being overwritten somewhere by another rule in your CSS. And you can usually like sort of scroll through here and figure it out, or not. So that's where all those rules are being applied. If I mouse over all the elements here. This right here, this user agent style sheet that is locked. These are rules that the browser itself is applying to your HTML. So if you had no other CSS, like we could turn off all the CSS, it would still style it a little bit. Most browsers come with this default, this user agent style sheet. The user agent is just the browser. Okay, it's just another term for the browser. Most of them come with their own style sheet to make basic HTML legible. All right, and that's what it does mostly is just move it away from the window edges. Right, remember text to be legible needs some space around it. Right, if you stick it next to things, it's very hard for people to sort of find that edge of the letter forms to be able to then read it. Okay, it's very uncomfortable. So you tend to give text space around it, so the eye can find the letter forms. So there's that. On all three browsers, there's going to be like an indicator up somewhere up here in the middle. Firefox doesn't have it. I mean, it's going to be here in the console, but I don't see any other kind of error indicator. Chrome has it right here. There's one error. Oh, yeah, I can't find this file that it thinks it needs, the favicon.icode, because I didn't make one. Do you guys know what a favicon is? Anybody? Yeah, Favicon's a little icon that shows up here in the tab. That's called the favicon. Fav icon. I don't know why it's called a favicon. I don't know if it's like an abbreviation of favorite icon or whatever, but like, you know, it could be something like where if you save the if you save it to your favorites or bookmark the page or something, generally there's like a little icon that will show up next to the text, right? It could be because it references that icon. You can take any image, save it as a .ico file, you know, just change it in the browser and then dump it into the main directory, and it will load it as your favicon. You can put GIFs up there, little simple GIFs. Yeah, don't put really big ones, of course, because then it takes your page forever to load. And it's super tiny, so it's going to be very hard to read. But you can put anything up there. You can have a lot of fun with it, actually. So yeah, I don't know why I'm not getting errors up here. Do you want dark? Oh, something else that I really like about Firefox's debugging, they have this right here, this take a screenshot of the entire page. This is really handy for us, right? If we work on a design, we want to be able to screenshot that design and put it on our put it on our portfolio or something, right? But really, the only way you can do that without like a special tool that can screenshot it is to be like, you know, screenshot. Actually, sorry, that didn't work because there was no sound. Is there sound now? There's still no sound. Jeez, that got cranked down, didn't it? Yeah. Sorry, you know, for effect. You know, take a screenshot, scroll down, screenshot, scroll down, and then open it in Photoshop and try to stitch it together, like line it up and overlay it and stuff. Pain in your ass. It is terrible. So, you know, this take a screenshot. The icon is like right here when you turn it on. You just do that, click it. It will download it for you. And you open it, and boom, a nice clean screenshot of the entire page. Really useful for portfolios. Okay, so stuff you build in this class, or later on if you take web design with me, or interaction design, we do stuff like this. It's a good thing to do. So, all right. Yeah, so my recommendation is going to be Firefox. I'm going to be working mostly in Firefox, but like I said, you generally are going to have all three up when you're debugging because they handle things a little differently. Okay. Trying to think what else. If you have the screen space, you know, it's good to like kind of break this one out and stick it somewhere else. I usually will work with it just down here. Yeah, I don't know. We'll get started. We're going to be using this framework called this part of CSS called Flexbox. Flexbox. So this Flexbox Froggy, anybody take a look at this yet? No, I don't blame you. This is actually something I want you to do though over Thanksgiving break. It's really easy and simple. It's just a really simple, goofy web game that teaches you Flexbox. And what Flexbox does is just teaches you how to move stuff around, move elements around on the page. Okay. So you have some HTML, and that's the frog and this lily pad, and you're trying to get the frog on top of the lily pad. Like they're telling you what to put here, but justify content. So how do you justify the content? You put it on the end, at the end of the Flex container. And that moves. That's just CSS that moves the frog over there. Okay, it's really simple. We're going to use some of it today, and I'll show you as we work. All right. Well, I'm going to get started. I'm trying to think how to approach this. For practice, I think what I want everyone to do, instead of trying to like put your portfolio site together like right away and practice learning HTML and CSS doing that, I want everyone to just scrape get a simple Wikipedia page and take the text and images off that Wikipedia page, just as practice. Okay, just to have some basic content to style. So we'll do that, and then after we kind of get a handle with it, and we're comfortable moving things around and styling them, then you can get everything ready for your portfolio page, like the work you've done in class, and organize and style all that. Does that make sense? Does that sound good? Yeah? Okay. All right, so let's do that really quick. All right, so I'm just going to go to Wikipedia. And just because I think it's fun, I just like to hit random article. 2008 New York Liberty season. What is this? Oh, WNBA. How much is here? No, that's a lot of tables. We're not going to do that. Avoid things with tables. Lynn Verlaine. Singer-songwriter. She's 35. She's from Belgium. Look at that. There's like nothing here. So, a couple of criteria. There needs to be images, and there needs to be at least like 2 sections, and really not a lot of tables. That's a lot of tables. We're not going to deal with tables. Oh boy, tables. Come on. Minister for Treaty of Waitangi negotiations? Oh, New Zealand. Interesting. Andrew Little. Yeah. I'm gonna say no. This is fine. This is really easy. All right, so we got a couple images that we can play with, and a little bit of text. Super little bit of text. It's really not much. The Karst Cave is known as Witch's Cave. Where is this? Slovenia. Anybody ever been to Slovenia? No? No. I mean, I don't know why I'm surprised, but I have a friend from Slovenia. Okay, well, let's take this. So let's set up our project. Like anything, well, no, not like anything, but when you're working on websites, a lot of what you want to do is work from within a folder. The folder hierarchy, so the structure of the folder, it mimics the hierarchy of a website. It mimics the order that subfolders need to be in, and images, and sort of where the dependencies are, like where the assets are, images and CSS files and stuff like that. Oh, we haven't set up Atom yet, have we? The text editor. We didn't do that. Oh crap. Okay, we got to do that. So let's do 324 tests. I'll call it practice. Okay. Well, before we even do that, we need to set up Atom. Atom.io is the link or the URL for the browser or the text editor that we're using. Interesting. It's put out by the GitHub people. If you have another text editor you like to use, I know Lily, you said VS Code, right? You're going to use that. That's fine. I would avoid Text Wrangler. I don't know it very well, so I won't be able to help you. Atom is fine. Sublime is fine. TextMate, if anybody still uses that. Again, I don't care about Emacs or Vim, so if that's a concern for you, whichever you like, I don't care. But I'm going to do everything in Atom, all right? Although Atom was acting really weird for me over the weekend, so if it doesn't work, I might use VS Code. We'll see. But Atom is really simple, really easy to use. So download Atom if you haven't. If you have, then open Atom up. We need to install a couple plugins. What is using half of my memory? Oh. Yeah. Oh, do I have VS Code open? Oh, I do. Hey, look at that. I didn't realize I had so much open. Okay. All right, Adam. This is the department website. This is what was causing me a lot of problems. I'll close that. Like I said, Adam was a pain this weekend. Start a new file. Man, it's just going really slow. Okay. So you want to bring up your settings window. Who's still downloading it? Okay. I'll wait a second. Once you open it, though, you should see like a welcome page or welcome tab, and then you want your settings, okay, which you can find by going up to Atom and then Preferences, or just hitting Command comma. You can close that welcome tab if you just mouse over the tab. There should be an X that shows up. Your colors will look a little different, maybe. I can't remember if I have the default theme installed right now or not, or if I installed something else. I don't know what theme do I have. I have one dark for my theme and and for my syntax. So I don't remember if that's default or not. But you can go to themes and kind of play around with that. Oh, is there a one dark for VS Code? All right. So there's a couple of things that we need to enable and also a couple of things we need to turn off. On your settings, what you should enable, let's see here, audio beep, automatically update, blah, blah, blah. Symlinks, open empty editor, yeah. Oh no, that's fine. Okay, all that is fine. You can go back over the video and just make sure that your stuff says roughly what mine does. Oh, editor, that's what I wanted. There we go. Oh, so a couple things on editor. All of these tabs, auto indent, atomic soft tabs, indent on paste, confirm checkout head revision, this stuff should all be turned on by default. Okay, if it's not, make sure it's all selected. Font family, yours is probably going to be something else. You want a monospace font. Okay, does anyone know what a monospace font is? Anyone want to take a guess? What's the word? One space. Yep, one space. Mono means one space. It's where every letter, every character in the typeface takes up the exact same amount of width and height. Okay, and what this does is that when you're coding on a grid. All right, you're coding on rows and columns. So all your letters will line up in columns. Does that make sense to everybody? That makes debugging really easy because it's not the most comfortable thing to read. Like you wouldn't read a novel in a monospace font, but it makes things like this easy to notice errors and stuff. Also makes like multi-cursor editing really easy, and I'll show you guys how to do that. And then a font size. This is up to you. It's just the font size. When I start coding examples, I'll up the font size so you guys can see it from the back. But whatever you're comfortable with, doesn't matter. If you put in the name of a font in here, it needs to be a font that you have installed on your system. Okay. If you're curious about the monospace fonts that you have, and you have a Mac, you can open up FontBook. On Windows, I have no idea. You have to Google it. I have no idea where the fonts are kept. And then you can search by type. So I think you can just type in monospace. Monospace. Except I have so many that it makes FontBook like lag like crazy. Nope. Oh, that's gonna let me do that. It is not. All right. Monospace. Nope. Not gonna let me do that either. Can I search by style? Here we go. Monospace. No? Alright. There's gotta be a way. I thought you could.
I think it's on the sidebar. It says fixed.
Fixed width? Oh yeah, fixed width would also be a monospace. That's dumb that it doesn't say monospace. Anyway, yeah, thank you. Click on fixed width if you see that over here. If you don't, I don't know what to tell you. Might be able to turn it on, so I'll have to look into it. But these are all the different monospace fonts I have selected. I think some of these are Chinese or regular. No, they're just different scripts that I'm not going to use. That does not look monospaced. Okay, Courier. Oh, Courier is monospaced. Interesting. Huh. Anyway, just pick one you like. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't. I like Roboto Mono. It's one I downloaded from Google Fonts. So you can go to fonts.google.com and find it if you want. Otherwise, Menlo I think is the default for Macs. Monaco is another good one. But whatever. All right, then we want invisibles. So we want the show invisibles to be enabled, which is down here for some weird reason, not next to where it talks about what the invisible characters are. Turn this on. All right, this show invisibles tab, it's like you need to scroll past, like where it says invisibles. It really should have show invisibles right up here, but it does not. I can probably change that, but anyway. Show invisibles, you want that turned on. Show line numbers, make sure that's on as well. Soft wrap. Turn on soft wrap. Okay, I don't care about soft wrap at a preferred line length, but soft wrap, what that'll do is instead of like continuing one line of text past where your window pane ends, so just you have to like scroll horizontally to see the end of it. It just indents it so that it fits within your pane without actually putting like the invisible character that means it's called a line ending, but the invisible character that means go to the next line. Because we don't want a new line, we want that all to be on one line, but we want to be able to read it without having to scroll, for a mile to the right or something. Okay, does that make sense? It'll make more sense in practice. Indent guide, make sure that's on. This is a line that shows your indentation level. All right, lines everything up. Tab length, make sure that's 2. Tab type, whatever. Auto is great. Zoom font when control scrolling. Oh, right. That's up to you. You're probably not going to control scroll. So that's what control scrolling is when I do this. When I'm zooming in like this, that's control scrolling. It's an accessibility thing. I do it so that you guys can see little things. But it's for people that can't see very well. They need to like zoom in on a portion of the screen. You can turn it on in the system preferences on a Mac. All right, so that's all the stuff for the editor. The rest is going to be done under packages. So what we want to do is make sure that, well, you don't need all of these. The package that you want first to install is called Emmet. So you'll need to go to Install, the Install tab here. Click on that. And then right here in this bar, just type in Emmet, E-M-M-E-T. Hit Enter. You want this very first one, the Emmet IO. Emmet is this plugin that makes, it does something called IntelliSense, which is like auto-completion, essentially. You start typing a few things and it'll pop up this little subtext menu of, okay, maybe trying to guess like what you mean. You drop your book. Python, you're learning Python? Yeah. That's great. Python's awesome. You know what Python's named after? Monty Python? It is. Okay. Who are you taking it with? Dr. Oh, cool. Okay, yeah. I wonder if she should know that. But yeah, the guy that invented it, he wanted to name it something kind of just whimsical, and he loved Monty Python, so he just named it Python for Monty Python. Yeah. And there's lots of little Monty Python jokes in the documentation. It's good. If you've seen like Holy Grail or something like that, you'll find some of those references. So. Anyway, Emmet is just a good shorthand tool for HTML and CSS. It also comes with this like really powerful formula system, which I'll show you guys, for generating like lots of HTML really quickly. Definitely install this. One of the others that we want to install is Color Picker. All right, so you'll go to Install, type in Color Picker. Oops. You want the one by Thomas Lindstrom. This is just a really easy, simple pop-up color picker. So we're going to be dealing with color in hex code. All right, hex code is a hexadecimal. It's 6 characters, digits and letters, numbers and letters that are preceded by a hashtag, an octothorpe. That's what the hashtag is actually called. It's an octothorpe. Just like the exclamation mark is actually called an interrobang. They have great names, don't they? I think the question mark is just a question mark. I don't remember actually what its real name is, but anyway, and like the and sign is an ampersand, right? Most people probably know that. No, yeah, it's my favorite symbol. But yeah, the octothorpe, the hashtag, the pound sign, whatever you want to call it. That when you put that and then you follow it with 6 letters or numbers, you'll make a color. A color will be rendered on the screen. All right. Instead of guessing or trying to have like a web page up of hexadecimal colors, install Color Picker and you can just hit Command-Shift-C and you'll get this Color Picker. Now by default it starts at RGB for some dumb reason. You can just come down here to the bottom and switch it over to hex and then scroll around and that's the value to get that color. Once you find the color you want, you click on it, it puts it in there, and you're good to go. Oops. Alright. So we want that one, Color Picker, Emmet, and you can install Minimap if you want, you don't have to. I don't think we're going to be... Oh, Open in Browser. You want Open in Browser by Mag B. Kaleman. I don't know who this is. It adds 11 milliseconds to startup time. How dare it. That's so you can right-click on your code and just have it open in the browser. If you want to, Pigments. Pigments is really good. By Abe33. Pigments will display. So if we stick in one of those hex code colors, like we just did. Sorry. Let's pick a color. Ah. Is it gonna know it? It's a plain text file, so it's probably not gonna know. Oh, it's not going to do it. Oh, wait. Let me change this to CSS. There we go. So I changed it to CSS, so now it knows that it needs to treat this as a color. So it's highlighting it in the color that it is. All right. That highlight is kind of misleading, though, because sometimes you'll get error codes that'll highlight things in different colors. So what I like to do with Pigments is actually change it to be, you can go to Settings and do this. So click on... Sorry, I did that kind of fast. Wherever you've got your packages and they're installed, it should be alphabetical. So come down to Pigments, go to Settings, and then there's a type, marker type, native dot. Oh, why is it not doing the dot? Huh. It is set to do dots. Here's some examples of what it can do. Why is it not doing dots? That's interesting. Just save it. I'm just going to save it in here for a second. So it opened up a project drawer to show me hierarchy. But it should be showing up dots. That's really weird. Does it need to be updated? Huh. Anyway, well, I don't know. Seems broken, I guess. Maybe it'll work for you. I might have something that's breaking it. I hope that's, yeah. It's the current version. It would tell me to update it. So that's really the 4, I guess, or what? Pigments, Open in Browser, and Emmet for sure. Oh, Color Picker as well. So there's 4 packages you should install. Minimap you can install if you want to. You don't have to. What this does is it gives you literally like a little mini-map over here that's like a thumbnail of your code. And so if you have like thousands of lines of code, you can just click and drag and scroll through that code really, really easily. One thing that actually, let me make sure is turned on. In your editor, here we go. In your editor, you should have this turned on, scroll past end. So come back to Settings, go to Editor, It's like halfway down, I think. Scroll past end. What this does is it lets you, if you have just a few lines of code, you know, like, I don't know, you know, if you have a couple lines of code and you're like typing down here, it's way more comfortable to type and look in the middle of the screen than it is to try to like look at things down at the bottom of the screen and type. And what this will let you scroll past that end, you know, because you only have so many lines. You only have the line up to where you're actually typing. Instead of having to like hit enter a bunch of times to give yourself a bunch more lines so you can scroll up, it just lets you do that. All right, it seems like a little thing, but it actually makes a big difference when you're coding all the time. Okay? Yeah? All right. I know this is a little tedious. I'm sorry. It gets exciting once you start putting stuff together. It's exciting for me at least. So maybe not for you. Okay, so that's how we set up our editor. It's kind of dry and boring. But once you have that done, then we can get going. So to start the project, create a folder somewhere. Where did I put it? Create a folder somewhere. Call it whatever you want. Doesn't matter. Wherever you store your homework. But that is going to be your main folder. So that is essentially the domain name for your site. All right. It's not at all what your domain name would be, and it's not how you set a domain name. But as we're working on this, you can think of it as like the domain name. Okay. So you know, Creighton.edu. This would be I would call my folder Creighton. Okay. Do you guys know in the URL, like in a full domain name, what the different parts are called? You guys ever been subjected to this? Oh man. Okay, so you have your top level domain, which is the .edu. It's the extension part. .com, .edu, .org, .info. You know, there's a bajillion of them now, right? You can have .art, whatever. That's your top level domain. Then you have your domain name, okay, which is the like Creighton or you know MySpace or Facebook whatever, right? That's called the domain name. And then you have the subdomain, which is what precedes it, if you have a subdomain, which is like World Wide Web or you know like blue.infrastructure.com when you go to Blueline or blueline.infrastructure.com. When you go to Blueline, that's what shows up, right? If you want to go to the journalism, if you want to go to JMC's website, it's jmc.creighton.edu, right? So we're a subdomain within a larger domain, which is within a top-level domain. Does that make sense? Okay. Funny thing, you can kind of like actually push it past that, so you can have something.creighton.edu. You can get a little weird with it, but you rarely ever see that. So that's the short and dirty of it. Okay, top level domain, and then subdomains. It just goes in reverse from the way you would read it. All right. So to set up your project, so if you're just opening your project, you've got Atom open maybe, or you've never opened your project in Atom before. You can do a couple different things to open it. You can come to File, Open. Wait a year and a day for it to pop up. Come on, Atom. This is what I was talking about. Atom has been really weird for me lately. Well, hopefully that would pop something up for you. It's not for me. Or you can drag your folder down and just drop it on the icon, and it should open up that way. Atom has been really slow. I don't know what's going on. What you're looking for is this project view, this drawer, this sidebar. No, that's really hard to see. Don't fall asleep. Yeah. You're adults, but yeah. It's Monday. It's early. So what you're looking for is this drawer here. This drawer gives you a view of everything that's within that folder right now. So it's like a finder window for that folder. This is very useful and really important. If you don't see it, all you see is this. Just mouse over to about the middle, and you should have this little half circle with an arrow pop out. Click on that, and the drawer will open. Okay. You can do a lot from within this drawer. We can add new folders. So we're going to add a CSS folder. You just type it in, CSS. Now it made a CSS folder. You can drag files and drop them on this into the folder. So this is going to be the start of my CSS file. So I'm going to put it in there, and then I'm going to rename it. And we're going to call it master.css. Doesn't really matter what you call it as long as the extension is CSS. Master is just what Emmet puts in as a default. So I tend to just call my main CSS files master, but you can call them style, you can call them main, you can call them Scooby-Doo, I don't care. Call them whatever, just so long as you keep it consistent. And then we need an index file, an HTML file in here, so you can right-click on the folder, make sure you're moused over the folder, hit new file, or just A, and type in index.html. Why we call it index.html and not like homepage or something is that when you go to a domain, like say you're going to Creighton.edu, you're actually loading, you know, in your address bar, it'll just say Creighton.edu, right? It just says Creighton up there. What's going on with that is you're actually loading Creighton.edu/index.html. You're loading an index.html file, okay? But browsers know that they don't need to show that because that's a default HTML file for a domain. So they just don't show it in the URL, in the browser, in the address bar. Does that make sense to everybody? They're just like, oh, you don't need to know that. You know, it's just assumed. So index just gets hidden essentially by the browser when you have an index file. It's always the very first page loaded. If you just type in a domain, index will always be the first page loaded automatically. So you tend to make it your home page or the landing page. Okay, it kind of keeps the address bar looking clean. So if you wanted to have like, you know, your portfolio.com/projects, you would, to make that a clean URL, you would have your portfolio. What you would load was your portfolio.com/projects/index.html. But in the browser, it would just show up as /yourprojects. Does that make sense to everybody? When I say slash, I just mean /. That means a folder. Okay? All right. So index.html, CSS file, and then we need a folder for images. I just abbreviate this, but you can call it images. You do not need to use capitalization. Please don't. Please just keep everything lowercase. It makes it way easier to read. Doesn't feel like you're shouting. If you start introducing capitalization, then you have to make sure it's consistent. So you have to remember to always do it, and that can be a pain. So the easiest thing to do is just not use capitals when you're coding. Okay? Well, at least HTML and CSS. Make sense? You might have something like Python or JavaScript where you use camel case, in which case you'll need to, well, Python you don't need to use camel case, but JavaScript you would, jQuery you would, where capitalization matters. But in HTML and CSS it doesn't matter at all, so just don't use it. So yeah, I like to call it IMGS, which is actually the image is the element, the HTML element for images. Also, you save yourself 2 characters. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. You could just call it I. You can call it whatever you want. It doesn't. It's up to you. Just so long as you remember where it is. Okay. So that's where we're going to stick all of our images. There's nothing in it right now. So if I click on this arrow to expand it, it won't show me anything. But that is the basic structure of a website. All right. The subfolders and the files that you would need to get started. All right. And this is how you should organize yours. If it's not organized this way, I will take points off. Well, I'll say something to you first, and if you don't fix it, then I'll take points off. All right? I'm very picky about this. All right, it's clean and it's easy for other people to understand where things are, and you don't lose your stuff. You're not like, don't have image files within your main directory and all that junk. Okay? Everybody good on that? All right. Yes.
Can you show how to set up the folder again really quick? I looked down and I'm so lost now.
Oh, sure. Like how to set up a clean project and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Oops, sorry, that's still loud. Alright, so now there's nothing in there, and you can see that. There is this .dsstore file, which is something that when you would delete files, the Mac OS will actually dump this .dsstore, which gets hidden by the Finder. .files you don't see in the Finder. This .dsstore is just like a record of what was deleted from here. So if you go to your trash and you hit undo, it knows where to put it. Does that make sense? You can actually safely just like
Mine is
delete it.
showing no project tab.
Oh, right. I'm sorry. That's what you meant. So just mouse over here to the middle of the left-hand side. You should have a little like pop-up, little circle with an arrow.
No.
Oh, because you're full screen. Did you not? Did you have a folder already set up?
I think I have
So what you can do is just do that. Cool. All right. Okay, so in that case, I will undo the deleting. Maybe not. Oh, that's my downloads, not my trash. Oh, hi, I totally emptied my trash. Never mind. All right, we'll make everything over again. So just to run through it again. I'm going to go a little faster this time. I actually have my index. So notice that it kept. Actually, this is important. If you delete everything out of your files but haven't shut Atom down, you're okay. Because what happens is Atom keeps an instance of that file open. Right? That's why they're up here in the tab right now. This little circle means that file has not been saved yet. Okay? If I close these tabs without saving them, then yeah, then the file's gone. Right? But if you accidentally delete everything out of your project, all you have to do is come back to that file open in Atom and just hit save and it'll put it in there. And then I'm going to make a folder here. CSS. Now I have that CSS folder selected. I'm going to come over here to my CSS file, hit save, saved it in there. Does that make sense to everybody? All right. My images folder in here. Okay, now we're back to what we had. Good. The other thing that we're going to do is I want you to code side by side. All right, and what I mean by that is your index file, your HTML and your CSS, I want them side by side in the window. So how you get that, and this is how I code. You don't necessarily have to do this, but I like my HTML on the left, and my CSS on the right. Okay, and how you get there is just by click and hold on the tab, and then you can kind of move it around. You can see it's trying to figure out, oh, where do you want to be? Don't code like this. People do this, and I don't understand why. It makes no sense. You need long, skinny things for coding because you have your width is not going to be very much, but you're going to have a lot of vertical space. So just code. Oops. Just code with HTML on the left, CSS on the right. If you want it the other way, you can. That's fine. This is just how I organize it. Okay. We don't need this. Let's delete it. All right. So we are going to style the Slivnica Mountains. Slivnica. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it. Slivunsa. 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 I don't know. How do you say that? There needs to be like a... That is not helpful. Where's like a little thing? Anyway. I'm curious. I don't know how to pronounce that. I'll figure it out. So yeah. So we're going to use this as our text. But let's set up our HTML before we do it. Oh, and the images. We need to grab the images. So over here on our index file, to get started with HTML. Now Wednesday, I don't remember if, well, I don't know if you guys remember how we were talking about HTML elements and how you always have two tags to an element, right? An opening tag and a closing tag. The closing tag starts with the /, but all HTML elements or all HTML tags are bracketed by the angle brackets, the little alligator mouths. You guys, yeah, these guys, right? You guys remember that? Yeah, the alligator mouths. They're just called angle brackets, although alligator mouths is fun too. Or crocodile, however you want. Yeah, animal, whatever. It would be really tedious to have to write this out like this all the time. And then come in here and do, oh, I need a head, etc., right? This is tedious, terrible. Luckily, we live in a modern era, And we have Emmet installed, so we can just type in HTML and look, oh, there's this little drop down. That's the IntelliSense. It's like, oh, do you mean HTML? Would you like to paste in an HTML boilerplate, which is essentially just a template? You're like, yeah, I do, because that would be way easier. So you just type in HTML, hit enter, and you get all your basic stuff that you need. All right? So all I did there is I just typed in HTML, and I hit enter. So that gives us some basic stuff here. It gives us a document type declaration, gives us our 4 tags or 4 elements that we need to really get started, HTML, and then the head and body tags that are inside the HTML. Remember, the head is going to have all your settings. We're setting, by default, we're setting a character set, which is UTF-8. UTF-8 is just Latin. Oops. It's the Western Latin. If you ever have questions about this stuff, you can always Google it. It's a Unicode. Yeah, it's just specifies a Unicode encoding standard. Yeah, pretty simple. All right, and then title. This title is what shows up in the tab up here. That stuff. Okay. Sometimes it's really fun to make fake Wikipedia editor accounts and go edit just the titles, because it takes people forever to notice. So if you want to make them goofy or inappropriate, you can do that. It's a lot of fun. And then your editor account, because it logs it, that editor account will get blocked. So that's why you gotta make fake ones. But if you're ever bored one day, try it out. I'm not saying do it all the time, right? But try it out. Yeah, so just whatever. This is going to be our practice. Actually, you know what? We're going to give it the name of the mountain. Slivnica. I really need to know how to say this. Slyanca? Slyanca? Is it anybody a linguist or a language specialist? How would you pronounce that? Slyanca? Nobody wants to take a stab at it? No? Okay. Mountain. Alright, there's that. The other thing that needs to be in here is a link to our CSS file. I don't have anything in there yet. You can put spaces in here. Notice all these little characters that are gray. These are your invisibles. They tell you kind of what sort of character is here that is giving you this formatting. All right. This is stuff that makes it easier for people to read code. It's not stuff that is at all necessary for the browser. You could take out every single one of these and have your HTML on one line that stretches for like a mile or so to the right, and it would still render correctly. Right? It would just be really, really hard to read for people. Does that make sense? So we do this formatting stuff. This little line with the notch on the bottom is the line ending. These lines are your tab indicators, right? Your indentation indicators, your indentation guides. The 2 little dots. A dot is just a space. 2 dots is a tab. Okay. We have our tab set up as two spaces. So that's really all we have here right now. Make sense? All right. You can put in spaces here just to make it easier for you to read. So I'm going to do a link. Just type in link, hit enter. It's a style sheet, and then it is in the folder called CSS/master.css. You don't always have to, but I do this. I delete that first /. There are some browsers where that will throw it off. I don't know that that is really the case as much anymore, but it used to be, and I find it causes fewer bugs if you just get rid of the / at the beginning of that. You don't always have to, but I just find it to be easier too. So it's up to you. You can get rid of the / or not. If you don't get rid of it and you go to load your HTML and it looks like your CSS isn't working, then odds are it's because the browser can't find your CSS file because it's reading that / as something dumb for some reason. I don't know. So I'm just saying it'll probably cause you fewer problems if you just get rid of that /. All right, so there's our link to our CSS. That's all we really need from that right now. So I'm going to give some space here just to make it easier to read. All right, so our body. Let's come back and look at what we're doing. All right, we have really just two paragraphs, one section here. We have a references section and an external links section. We're going to do both of those. And then we have some images, two images to use. Yeah, and we could do captions on the images. That would be fine. So really, we've got three. Let's see if we want to. Then you just need to think about how you want to style this. If we're going to kind of do something similar to what our main project is, where we divide it up into discrete horizontal sections, I think what we're going to do is something that's really popular. It's called a hero image. We're going to use this image as like a main full screen background image, and then we're going to put the title over it. Actually, I'll give you guys an example. Hero image website. So something like this, right? This right here is called a hero image, okay? Where then you have text on top of it. We're gonna do something like this, and then you would have more things underneath it. Does that make sense? All right. It's very, very popular, very, very common. I did it on the department website. It's a good way to just sort of showcase things, and without needing to have, you can do your nav without having to have the bar at the top, which the bar acts like a hat, or just feels weird, like it's pushing everything down. Although you can do the bar, because a lot of people like the bar. So, it's very common. Clients want it all the time. It looks good, and it's very easy to do. All right, so I'll show you guys how to do it. All right. So the reason I wanted you to think about that first is we need to know sort of how we're going to organize it before we start our HTML. Okay. So we're going to do probably, let's see, one main section. So we'll have the image. Let's actually download our image then. Is it big enough? Oh yeah, it's huge. Here's a trick in preview. I don't know if you guys know this, but you can change where things are saved. Let's put it, oh, you know what? Actually, just by going up to the title and clicking on it, go to Other, it will ask you where you want to be. We're going to save it in here. And then just hit Command S to save it. Close it. All right, and then we'll grab this one. Oh, it's interesting. Oh, they're adding, so this isn't an image, they're actually adding the location through code. We're not going to mess with that, so we'll do something else with that. I think we're gonna cheat. Oops, we're gonna cheat a little bit. Command Shift T. Yeah, there we go. Sorry, guys. Okay, back to where we need to be. Yeah, so we have some text, and then this section, and then some images. So yeah, we're gonna be good. All right. So let's get back to our code. So we need, first off, we need a container that we can tell to be 100% of the width and the height. That will have the image in the background, and then we need to put some text on top of it. Okay. How you get the image in the background with text on top is pretty simple, but you got to think about it a different way. Instead of adding the image in the HTML, you add the image in the CSS, so it acts like a wallpaper, right? So the text sits on top and the image sits behind it. All right. This can be done very easily, but you just got to set it up in the right way. All right. So first off, we need like one big container. We're gonna use our section semantic HTML, and then here's where Emmet comes in handy. We're gonna write an Emmet formula. You could just write section and do what we've been doing, hit enter, and then come up here and be like, okay, I need to be able to tell what kind of a section this is. I need to give it a name. You give names in two different ways. You give it an ID or a class. They have general kind of best practice uses. Classes are for things that are repeated a lot. IDs are for things that are unique, okay, or not repeated. In practice, that doesn't really matter. you can kind of mix and match them, but that's sort of the general way. Like practically, it doesn't matter. You can use them more or less interchangeably. The only real big practical difference is you can only have one ID on an element, but you can have multiple classes on an element. All right, and if you have if you have an element and it has a setting set in its class, you can override that setting with the ID, but not the other way around. So ID settings take precedent over class settings. Does that make sense? Okay. There's so much to know that, don't worry about it if you forget it. If you do forget something, a good place to look is just type in Moz CSS, hit enter, and go to the Mozilla developer documentation for CSS. That is not specifically what I want. That will get me there, though. You want web docs. Here we go. So this is resources for developers. Go to tech, go to CSS, and this is all the exhaustive reference for CSS. So this tells you what CSS is, how to write it, and then here's all the different things you can do in CSS. This will all be on the quiz. You have to know all of this. Kidding. Totally kidding. In my web design practical, I let you guys use this resource because I don't remember all of it. I'm always just like, oh yeah, how do you do font kerning again? I forget. Because there's just so much. But, all right, back to code. So section, we are going to give it an ID of, so you can type it out like this, section ID 1, and that would get you there. But that took forever in a day, and you're doing lots of typing, so you want to be as efficient as possible. So you can actually do section octothorpe 1, hit tab, and now you've got section ID 1. All right, that is an Emmet formula. It's a very basic Emmet formula. So section #1 tab enter. So that is our main box. All right, this is the container that is going to have the image attached to it, and that's it. But it has everything else inside of it. Okay, so the stuff that it has inside of it, we need to decide. It's going to have, well, the name definitely, Slanitsa. Maybe we'll do this first part. Yeah, we'll do this first sentence here. That'll be the text that's inside of it. So we got to think about how we want to organize or style that. In your head or on a piece of paper or whatever, you can sort of draw it out. But we're going to have a big element. So a big text object that is the name of it, right? So you can do this in a couple different ways. The text objects, I'll show you. I prefer that you use the Mozilla HTML reference site and not the what's the other one everyone likes to use. Drives me bonkers. W3 Schools. This is okay. It's just not as exhaustive. It's not as in depth. Here's the HTML one though, and we're going to use H1s through H6. These guys are just ways to style fonts without actually having to use a style sheet. Right? This is an HTML element that will determine size. And H1 is the biggest, and H6 is the smallest. Well, actually, P tag is the smallest, but in terms of the headers, H6 is the smallest. All right. So if you use an H1, it's going to be big, even if there's no CSS file. So we'll use an H1 for this. It also helps you just sort of know that you need to have big text. Slivnica. Is that what it was again? Don't worry about copying the code right now. I mean, you can keep working if you want to, but I am recording, so you can always go back. Slivnica, yep. Slivnica. So I know I want that to be big. I want it to be in the center. So I'm going to make it an H1, then slightly smaller, maybe 2 steps down smaller, so like an H3. We're going to have, mountain in parentheses. So that's an H3. And then I know that I want this, the rest of this, like 1100 meters peak in the Dinaric Alps in Slovenia, southeast of blah blah blah. So this stuff, so we'll do this. We'll do an H4, and we'll call this one the, this will be the number, so like 15 years. And then we'll do a paragraph tag, and this will be the rest of the sentence. Okay? So now that we have some HTML in here, we can actually go look at this in the browser and see what it looks like with no CSS. So I'm going to right-click on it, go to Open in Browser. It's going to open it up. This is what it looks like with no CSS. Okay? And this is fine. This is basic. Right? We're just getting some stuff in here. It's okay. Alright, so now we have it open. That's great. Cool. Let's. So that's our first section. That's more or less what we're going to have here. We might add some stuff to it later. You know what? We need a logo. Let's do a logo. So we're going to make a nav. Yeah, we're going to make a nav. So we're going to put a nav at the top. And inside this nav, we're going to have like a logo on the left and then links to the other sections on the page. So we'll say, we'll give the nav an ID. So it's always good to do that. We'll call it top nav, top-nav. And then we have two sections in this nav essentially. We have the logo section and then we have the menu button section. Okay, we want to package those essentially. So we're gonna say div ID logo, div hash logo. And this is gonna have a empty div in it. Actually, you know what? We're gonna use that to style an empty div because we're gonna make a very simple logo by drawing with some CSS. And then we're gonna have a menu, which is an unordered list. There are two different list types. There's an unordered list and an ordered list. So an unordered list doesn't have numbers, it just has little bullet points. Okay? And this is like the basic framework for making a menu. An ordered list would have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, or A, B, C, D, E, etc. So unordered list. Here's a nice Emmet formula. You could just hit tab. Ordered lists and unordered lists always have inside of them list elements. So those are the items on your list. Okay, and the tag or element for those is just li for list element or list item. Sorry. But with Emmet, instead of like hitting enter, instead of just hitting enter and then typing in list elements, and then having to come over here and type in list elements, it's tedious. So instead of having to do that, we'll use Emmet and we'll say list elements with unordered list that has inside of it. That's what the left-facing angle bracket is. Says says that there's something inside of it. A list item times 3. So we'll have 3 list items inside of an unordered list. Does that make sense? Kind of what's going on with this? Hit tab and it builds it for you. You can make a really I could sit and figure out a very complex Emmet formula to generate all the HTML that I already have on this page right now, including the text that's inside of the H elements. Does that make sense? You can figure it out. Like if you know in your head what you want to be on the page, you can write an Emmet formula that will write out your Emmet formula, hit tab, it'll generate that HTML for you. It's complex. You gotta be good at Emmet, but you could figure it out. Right? You can do it. Emmet is very powerful. I use Emmet mostly this way just to help me make things really quickly, not the entire page. All right, so right now we're just going to call this menu. We'll call it menu. We're going to come back to this later and do something different with it. So just type in menu. If you have this box pop up and you don't want anything from it, right? You want it to go away, just hit escape. and it will go away. Don't forget to save your project every now and then. If you have a blue dot up here, that means it needs to be saved. If you don't have a blue dot, that means you saved it. Alright, so now I have a section top nav, which is empty, section top nav, or nav ID top nav, with a div inside called logo that is empty. There's nothing inside of this, so it's not going to show up. It has no dimensions, nothing. Alright, so it will not show up on the browser, or in the browser at all right now. And then I have an unordered list with 3 list items inside of it. These will show up. So if we go look at it, go back to our page, reload it, that's what we should see. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? This is all default styling. The reason why we don't see that div logo is because it has no dimensions. It has no width, no height, and there's nothing inside of it to give it dimension. Right? These other things have text inside of it, which gives them dimension, makes them visible. That makes sense? Gives them width and height. Yeah? Okay. Alright. Gesundheit. Cool. So that's good for the first section. Normally I wouldn't do this, but let's go ahead and style the first section, and then we'll add HTML underneath it and style that. Normally I recommend doing all your HTML first, and then styling. But it's more exciting to actually start seeing something show up, so let's just do that. Alright, so we have a little bit of HTML in here. Let's come over to our style sheet. So one of the things I like to do first is I like to drop a declaration block for the body. Alright, and this is just that body, that default body element that renders everything to the browser window. This is to take off some of that user agent style sheet junk that browser windows will put on there. Okay, and this is to avoid bugs in spacing and stuff later. So I like to set margin to 0, padding to 0, and that's it for now. We might come back and add a few things to it, but for now that's what we're going to do. Now remember, with CSS, order of your declaration blocks doesn't matter at all. It'll read the entire CSS page and apply it all. Okay, but the structure of the declaration block does matter. So you always need to have the element, ID, whatever that you're targeting, like what you're trying to set a setting for. You open the block with curly braces, right? It's the, if you hold shift and then hit the brackets, you know, the keys above your return key and your comma key, apostrophe key, sorry. That'll get you your curly braces, and then inside of those you can set your settings. Your settings will always follow this structure. You'll have the setting name, followed by a colon, followed by a value, followed by a semicolon. Semicolon ends the setting. Tells the browser to then go look at the next setting. Okay? Please, please, please indent. It should do it automatically if you hit enter after writing your element name and opening with the curlies. Please do not let it look like this. Alright, that doesn't tell me that this setting, like I can't look at this right away and know that that setting belongs inside of that block. Does that make sense? I don't care where your curly braces are. Some people like to do this. I don't care if you do this or if you do this. I prefer this method, and actually these methods have names. I just don't remember them off the top of my head. Some people like them one way, some people, it's like the Emacs and Vim argument. It's meaningless if you don't know the history behind it, and if you have better things to care about. Okay? As long as you have these, you'll be fine. I don't care where they are. Alright, so that's the basics of a declaration block. So, body, we take that stuff off. Then we just come down over our HTML and just sort of start styling things. So section is our parent for everything. Come over here and close it. You can see that it has everything inside of it. So I'm going to style section ID 1 first. A couple different ways you can do this. You could type in just hashtag 1. That hashtag is just the CSS symbol for ID. You could do this. That would be fine. This is kind of the quick, lazy, buggy way to do it. All right, I don't recommend it. I recommend the more verbose way, I guess. Explicit, more explicit way, right? Where you're saying specifically the section with ID 1. So if I had a section with ID 1 and then I had like an article with ID 1, I could target them individually. by saying section, not dot, sorry, section #1 is different than article #1. If I just have #1, it'll apply the same settings to both of them. Does that make sense? All right, so we want to be specific. Section #1. Well, I know this needs to have the image applied to it as a background image. All right, that's a setting in CSS. But I also know that I want it to fill the browser window, right? So I want its width to be the width of the browser window, and I want its height to be the height of the browser window. All right. To get that, we use a unit called viewport width and viewport height. Okay, VH and VW. So width will be a 100 VW, viewport width. Height will be 100 VH. Now in some browsers this will cause a weird little bug. Safari it causes a bug, and Chrome it causes a bug. We'll see what it does here in a second. And then we'll fix it. So width and height, I set them. I like to then stick a space in there just to make it more legible. You don't have to put the space in there, like an empty line. And then let's do our background stuff. So background, you see I got a whole bunch of things. You can just start, if you just start typing in a few characters in it, it will find those characters. It's like BAKI, and I get background image. I can just hit enter. So we're going to put a background image. We're going to do it by URL, which is its address. I cannot for the life of me remember what URL stands for. Universal Reference Link? Seems plausible. We'll look it up. URL, and then inside the URL we're going to put a path to the image. Okay, this will load the image. Now, on Wednesday we talked about relative paths and absolute paths and relative paths, right? Global paths, local paths. Okay, same thing. So I'm gonna go over them again. A relative path is a path to a file or location. Well, it's always gonna be a file. A path to a file that starts in the file that you are putting that path in, right? That link in. Right, so we are starting in our CSS file, right? That's our point of departure, our CSS file, and then we're going to try to navigate to where the image file is. That would be a relative path. An absolute path finds the very absolute bottom or top level folder for the hard drive or system that you're on and gives you a very explicit path to the file. So in the case of my laptop, it would be the root, which is actually denoted by the tilde sign, okay, root, and then it would be the hard drive name, which is just Macintosh HD, and then users folder, and then my username, and then desktop, and then 324 practice, and then images, and then the file name. That would be an absolute path. Okay, the relative path is just from the CSS file is just going to be ... which means go up to the parent directory, right? So go out of the CSS folder and go into the 324 folder. ... / images, or imgs, whatever the name of your image folder is, / file name, which is Slivnica. Oops. And I capitalized it, so I need to capitalize it here. Slivnica, I don't know, whatever. .jpg, always put the extension in. Okay? Make things a little smaller here. A lot of space to work with. Alright, so that's my background image. That's how you would load that background image. Now if I do this, let's go look at it. That's a gigantic background image. Notice, oh, it does it in Firefox too. Notice that, it's 100% of the width, but I can wiggle it, right? I can wiggle it up and down too, even though it's 100% of the viewport height, this box. And this is the image. The image is just so big that we only see a small portion of it. So everybody kind of get what's going on here, right? So I have this wiggling room space stuff, which is terrible, right? We don't want that. How we get rid of it? It's because when you do 100% viewport width and height, it doesn't take into consideration the scroll bars that it adds. It's really, really terrible. It doesn't need to add the scroll bars, but it does, and then that throws off the math for the browser. It's a bug. So how we get rid of this is we go 100%. So we want section 1 to be 100% of the body. The body is always 100% of the viewport width, the browser window. So that gets rid of our horizontal wiggle. Now our vertical wiggle here is a little more difficult to get rid of. It actually has nothing to do with the viewport height unit. That actually doesn't have the bug. It's just the viewport width that has the bug for the scroll bar. What it has to do with is some margin or padding that's being added to this this unordered list. If this happens, don't freak out. Don't go to your code and try to like think about what's going wrong. Just inspect it. Go to your inspector. You have this handy little icon over here. They look different for each of the browsers, but this is just like your targeter or your picker. And then you can just mouse over things and be like, all right, what has, oh, hey, what's this thing? This has some margin. That's what the yellow color is, right? The unordered list has margin that is applied to it automatically, which gives you space, which pushes your image down from the top of the window. Does that make sense? Does that seem clear? Or is everyone just sort of like, what are you talking about? If that's clear to you, raise your hand. Why it's being pushed down. Okay. So it's being pushed down because we have an element, that unordered list, which by default, the user agent style sheet, remember, the browser, is just giving some space to it at the top. Margin will always push away from things. Margin pushes the container that has it away. Okay? Padding makes the container bigger. It pushes the bounds of the container away. Think of being like inside of a bag, right? If you're inside of a bag and you have padding applied to you, then you're just extending your arms and pushing the boundary of the bag away from you, okay? If you have margin applied to you, then you have this like buffer zone around the bag. It's not your arms, you just have this buffer zone, a force field, that's pushing other things away. Cool? So margin pushes other elements away, padding pushes the edge of the container away, the edge of the div. It's internal. Margin is external, padding is internal. All right, so let's take off the, let's add unordered lists to our body declaration of padding 0 and margin 0. So you just add that UL element in there. Come back to your window, reload it. It didn't work. Why didn't it work? Totally should have worked. Work. There we go. I just wasn't reloading it for some reason. Is that not Command R? That's what I was hitting. I know, Command R is not reloading it for some reason. There we go. All right. I wasn't clicked in the screen. Okay, so that gets me my browser window that is 100% of the viewport width and height. It's got that image, but we can't see the image because it's gigantic. So what we do, we tell that image, okay, well, image, you need to be a certain size. So background size. So there's a couple different sizes. Auto is the default. It just shows the image at its full pixel resolution. Okay. Contain. Contain will make the image fit the container that it's in without breaking its actual dimensions. Okay, so it won't skew it won't crop it, it'll just show that image. And so if we pick this, I don't think the image is the right dimension for the browser. Yeah, see how it's repeating over here? Right, so it's not breaking the image, it's not cropping it or anything, it's just filling the box, filling that container with that image and then repeating it because there's some leftover space. And by default it repeats, it tiles. Okay. Well, how do we get the image to fill that whole space? Well, instead of contain, we pick cover. So cover. And that will just crop the image. So it's actually cropping a bunch off the bottom. Make sense? Yeah? Okay. All right. Then let's do, let's see. Oh, so something else you can do. So say you do this and there's actually a part of the image that you like better than, you know, this default kind of thing going on here. Actually look at the image real quick. Maybe I want to see more of this bottom water, the dark water part. Remember, I can't really see that. You can actually move that image around a little bit. So background position. So you got 5 different settings: left, right, left, center, right, bottom, top. Center is the default. Let's try bottom. So this will align it to the bottom of the container. Should move it up. So now we have more of that dark space. I know that I'm going to have like a big thing of text right here, so maybe that's not exactly what I want. Let's try center. Oops. Always put your semicolon. Yeah, let's try top. Center's okay. That's kind of where we were before. We'll play with this first and then go from there. So, all right, really easy, really nice, really simple. That's pretty much all you have to do for your that section. Now let's move on to the nav. All right, so nav ID top nav. So now we just need to give. You always kind of need to declare dimensions for things. All right. By default, they're going to be the dimension of stuff that's inside of them, like text. But if you have elements that you want to position specifically, like using flex, like we're going to start using flex here in a second, then it's good to always give the dimensions you want it to be. Okay. Just think of flex as like a way of grouping things and moving those groups around. So top nav, I want to be 100% of its parent. So we're just going to say 100% with 100%. So it'll be 100% of section 1, which is 100% of body. Percentages are always, the next parent. You okay, Kate?
Yeah, I was just trying to.
Is it too small? If I make it much bigger, it's hard for me to.
Okay, that's better.
Okay. So it's going to be 100%. We're not going to declare a height because the stuff inside will give us that height. Okay. But we do need to declare flex. So we're going to change the display from its default of inline to flex. Flex is always turned on the parent. So if you want to move stuff around, go to the parent of those containers and put flex on them. You'll actually do a lot of your flex settings in the parent. And I think, did I link to the complete guide to Flexbox? Not sure if I put that in for you guys or not. I know it's long, tedious lecture stuff. At least I'm not reading from like a psychology textbook to you. Who's been in a class like that? Raise your hand. PowerPoint slides where they just read the PowerPoint slide to you? Yeah. I had a couple geography classes like that in college. Okay, I did not link this to you, so I will link this for you. This is vital. All right, this thing is, I use it all the time still. This is from a website called CSS Tricks, which is one of my favorite websites. This just breaks down Flexbox really easily. You have properties for the parent, properties for the children, so the container and the items, flex container, flex items. How do you do stuff with it? So as you're using Flexbox Froggy, you can also refer to this. Right? You're going to do Flexbox Froggy over break, so that's going to be homework for over break. All right, let's go back. So you turn Flexbox on the parent, which is now going to make things, instead of that unordered list being vertical, like it is here, stacked on top of each other like this, it's going to stretch it out horizontally. Okay. Let's save it. Ha! I should have. Why did it not? Top nav. Oh, because, right. So I turned on flex for the top nav. That only works for the unordered list and the div. I need to turn flex on for the unordered list as well. So let's go, let's target it. So we're going to say nav, top nav, and then grab the unordered list inside of that. All right. So display, it's turning on flex for that unordered list. Display flex. There we go. And now it has those terrible bullets. Okay, so let's, before we take that stuff off, let's come back up to top nav. All right, so top nav has this box logo and unordered list. Let's give box logo something to do. So let's say div logo, give it a width and a height. We are going to, how do we want to do this? We're going to draw a little bit with CSS just as practice. And you can draw like kind of complex shapes sometimes really easily with CSS. It can get a little hacky, but there is a guide for it. CSS shapes, and you want here we go, the CSStricks.com shapes of CSS. So this is how the settings that you would use for like a square, for a rectangle, for a circle, ovals, triangles. The thing I don't want you to do is use pixels. Okay, I want you to express everything in viewport width. That way you get a shape that will change its size as your viewport gets smaller or bigger. Okay, because it takes viewport width as its unit. Triangles up, that kind of looks like a mountain. We could do that. Let's make it a squished mountain though, so we won't use the same. Yeah, so what this is doing is it's making an empty box of no dimension, and then using the borders, so stroke, remember from Illustrator, stroke, it's setting border settings to be a certain size to get this kind of color in this shape. So these are really just like a weird combination of borders that we're seeing here. Alright, so we can do this, but we're going to play with it a little bit. Alright, so div logo, let's see, we're going to say width 0, height 0, border left, set 50 pixels, let's go 3% of viewport width, and then we want it to be solid and transparent. Axis kind of like a crop. Border right, 3% of viewport width, solid and transparent. And border bottom, this one will do 6% of viewport width, just to keep the ratio the same. Solid, and we'll call it, well, let's do ours as white. You can write white, it'll do white, that's fine. You can also put in the hex code. FFF is the shorthand for it. You'll see the little dot shows up. That's the color. This is shorthand for just FFF, whatever. But you know, white works too. Oops, not you. So now we have a little triangle there. I want it to be a little more squished though. Make this longer, I guess. What happens if we let's add some width to it and see what that does. I think this is going to totally mess it up. Just makes it taller. Like 1. Sorry, I'm trying to like figure out exactly how it's drawing. Nope, that made it skinnier. So 8. Sometimes you can just play around. Oh, that did make it fatter though. Huh. Alright, let's take this width off. That looks like a mountain, sort of, right? I don't know. Yeah, that's good enough for now. So maybe let's make this just a little smaller though. So let's go 3, 4, and 4. So keeping the ratios the same, but having them. Make a smaller little icon there. And this is all just to get sort of like this sort of flat mountain shape. That was it. I'm just playing with the settings to kind of tweak it and see. I've never done that before, so I want to try it. Okay, and our menu looks totally gross and terrible, but whatever. All this stuff is not organized at all the way we want it to be. Let's see. So we want nav. We want to give some space around the left-hand side and the top of nav to make our menu and our logo legible. And this will be the last thing we do, and I'll let you guys go, and we'll pick up when we get back from break. Okay. In order to do this, we're going to want to actually define a narrower width, a smaller width for nav. So instead of letting nav be the entire length of the page, we want to let nav only be a certain width of the page. Bring it in. Okay. So I'm going to make it 90%, not 190, 90% of the page. And by the nature of HTML and CSS, it's not going to do anything on the left. It's like saving. It did make it shorter, but it took off 10% on the right because it likes to. Come here. There you go. You see how you still have space over there on the right-hand side? That's where it puts the space. Because it likes to justify everything to the left. By default, it just move everything to the left. How we get it to center is by telling it to handle its margins differently. Okay. So we say margin, and here's some shorthand we're going to use. Margin has like 5 different ways of setting margins. Okay. You can specify a side, so you can have margin top, right, bottom, left. Okay. Or you can just type margin and then give it 4 values, or 2 values, or 3 values, and that will apply to certain sides. If you give it 2 values, the first value will apply to the top and the bottom, okay, because they counts that as a group, right? And then the second value you give it will apply to the right and the left. It counts those like your vertical axis and your horizontal axis. Okay. You give it 4 values. It applies the first. I'll just do this. It applies the first value to the top, and then it goes clockwise from there. So it's just think of a clock. Okay, you start at 12, you go around clockwise. So top, right, bottom, left. Right? 12, 3, 6, 9. That's one way to think about it. That's how it applies those 4 values. Right? So if I had 0, 1, 2, 3, 0 would be on the top, 1 would be on the right, 2 would be on the bottom, and 3 would be on the left. Okay, but you always also want to specify, if you're adding value, you want to specify unit. All right, so notice how much. But we're just going to do 2. We're going to say 0 on the top and the bottom. Don't add any margin on the top and the bottom of the nav. And then automatically apply the margin on the right and the left. And what this will do is it will take that 10%. Remember, we're at 90. The nav is 90, so we have 10% left over. It's going to split that 10% in half and apply it equally on the left and the right. So it centers it. Okay. You can't use text align center because that will just center the text inside of the container that you're applying that value to. If you want to move the entire container, you do margin 0 auto. All right, go back. Oh, first save it. Go back to your page. Reload. Come here and reload. There we go. So you have moved it over. Right, so we have 5% of our viewport width here. Now let's get our menu over there and then we'll be done. Let's clean up our menu a little bit. Display flex, that got our stuff organized. One thing we need to do is something called list style type. This is going to take the bullet points off, the style type none. And then we will set a justification for the elements. So justify content, so the list elements. We're going to do space between. And then we can do align self. Let's not do that. Let's come up here and apply it to the nav. So now what I want to do with the nav is I want to take the stuff that's inside of the nav, the logo and the unordered list, and I want to put them I want to put the logo at the beginning of the container, and I want to put the nav at the end of the container. Does that make sense? The flex end and stuff. So we're going to set justify content space between. And what that does is it takes the width of the two things and then divides or subtracts that from the width of the container and takes the remainder and puts it in between them. And practically what that means is once we define a width for our unordered list, which we'll call it 30% of the viewport width, and I'm just off the top of my head guessing. I might change it. So we have 30% here for the unordered list if the logo has no width and height. So hopefully this won't mess up too much. We'll figure it out. Save that. Come back here. There we go. Got my menu over here now on the right hand side. Put some space between the menu items because the unordered list also has justify content, but the parent of the nav has justify content, the nav itself, top nav, okay? And that puts that space in between the two of them. Does that make sense to everybody? I'm sure you'll all forget it by next week. It's okay. It's totally fine. All right, so your homework for break. Sorry to give you homework over break. We just have a lot to cover. Your homework for break is to do Flexbox Froggy. Okay? So in the responsive web site, right down here in the orange section, there's a link to it. I will also make an announcement. I'll just write it right now. Do Flexbox Froggy over break. Okay? Have that done, please. Tell you what, I will actually make it a separate assignment. That's what we'll do. So I'll make this separate assignment. What I want you to do is when you get to the end of Flexbox Froggy, I think it's like the lesson 24. So when you complete it, there's like a little success page. It's like, yay, you did it, you know, confetti and all that stuff. Screenshot it. Take a screenshot of that, and it'll show me on that you've completed all the lessons up to 24, and then submit the screenshot. All right. So, okay. Any questions about that? Just do it by Monday before class next week. Yeah? Shouldn't take you very long. Should take you maybe like an hour tops. Okay? All right. Have a good Thanksgiving. If you're traveling, travel safely, please. Everyone come back in one piece. 10 pounds heavier, but in one piece. You'll have to roll me in on Monday, I'm sure. All right. Hey, look, I made an assignment. Look at that. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. All right.
What's the name of the inspection tool for Safari again?
Oh, yeah. So if it's not showing up. Yeah, it's not. Okay,
yeah.
So go to your preferences.
Okay. Yeah.
And then go to advanced. Pops up. On the right hand side. And very bottom. Show development. It turns it off by default. Just so people don't like freak out. There's too much like Safari likes to only give you as much as you absolutely
And I can access.
Yeah, so just right click on the page.
Okay.
You got a really low resolution copy of that.
Okay.
So you need to actually click on the image,
And
go to where it is on
okay.
Wikimedia Commons, and then download it.
I see.
Don't just drag it from the Wikimedia page.
Okay. But yeah, it's all there.
Yep, there you
So I
go.
can get rid of the white lines up top and stuff.
Right.
Or, yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's you got to take the margin padding off the body.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Have a great break.
You too.